the Lord. Okay, what I feel, you got to have so go look for, and you're like, no, what I tell you. Whatever Kuta, whatever Kuta, whatever Kuta,
because it is in a lifetime we see somebody like you. Professor, I have seen your glass up to your brows off. But very current I'm speaking in my Hausa language. I am telling you that come with I want to go to Renchi. So with a woman sankai, woman say I can the kai, Mamma Chale back enemy. Oh, why will I go without you standing up and touching my head? My Professor, I'm your Vice Chancellor. I have come to tell you that your hard works are written on rocks and cannot be cleaned. You will show me those places that want to clean it, and I will tell you that your riches are in marbles. We appreciate you for bringing the intellectual juggernaut of the world to us. We appreciate you because we know that they told you that it was purple and gold. But when you came, you said to make it gold. We appreciate you. I will not fail to appreciate your eminent team. You will bring all these things to us, so that when we get to the world, we will show them that we are from the great center of learning. What more do I want? Tell me, what more do I want from the University of Benin? Tell me what do I want? Tell me. The professors have come. Every other professors have come because the bigger professor is here.
Please, another round of applause for Isaac Alate and Son of They are of the Department of Fine and Applied Arts. Not until Senate sit and approve their result, they still remain students of the university. They are among the graduating set. Thank you very much for appreciating them. Chief Engineer Gobadia, the ace son of Hussein, Chief John Inobahai, the Esere of Hussein Kingdom, are representing the Oluwawure of Hussein. Thank you very much for coming around. Professor Eddie Iraki, university orator will now tell us the next thing. Professor Diragu.
Very respected guest lecturer today, I respectfully request that you stand so that my guests can see you, sir, as I do the introduction, citation, sir. I want to start first on the note that volumes can definitely be written about this great man of today. So the best we are giving is just an abridged version of this great personality. Chairman, sir, and the respected audience at this historic second eminent lecture series, it is my pleasure and one of my finest moments to have this rare privilege to present to you one of the finest, most renowned, respected, revered, accomplished, distinguished, celebrated, and phenomenal figures in the academic and indeed the literary firmament of Nigeria, and more appropriately, the world. A professor of comparative literature and creative writing, this great Nigerian is definitely an undisputed literary colossus. A first-class author and critic in all the genres of literature, a quintessential international teacher, a man of uncommon and unparalleled acumen, capability, resourcefulness, an incurable and sagacious defender of the ideals of good governance, the indomitable and unstoppable critic of oppressors in Nigeria and indeed Africa, a nationalist that both through the pen and outright political activism fought for Nigeria's independence and the defense of its sovereignty and indissolubility, even to the point of going to jail. A mentor and begetter of numerous academic and professional children. A holder of international and national professional and numerous awards, including the world acclaimed and cherished Nobel Prize for Literature, the first African to be so honored. The Nigerian National Honor of the Commander of the Federal Republic, CFR, the holder of honorary doctorate degrees of Harvard University and Princeton University, 2 Ivy League universities in the United States of America, and another from University of Leeds, the alma mater of our old Vice Chancellor, Professor Orunwense. A UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for the promotion of African culture, human rights, freedom of expression, media and communication, and the holder of the chieftaincy title of the Akaleton of Ekpaland, that has the right to use the title Oloye. Unquestionably and undoubtedly, a strong, stout, sagacious defender and pillar of maintaining of the best norms and ethos of acceptable practices in Nigeria. A man of impeccable integrity, honor, uprightness, forthrightness, and dependability. The now iconic and living legend in both his profession and the political and socio-economic development of Nigeria, the one and only Professor, Chief, and in a special way, His Excellency Akiwande Oluwole Babatunde Soyinka. This silver-haired Professor Wole Soyinka was born on 13 July 1934 in Abeokuta to the family of Mr. Samuel Ayodele Soyinka and Mrs. Grace Ainola Soyinka. It is interesting to note, Mr. Chairman, that among our dear Professor Soyinka's cousins were the one and only legendary musical icon, Fela Ransom Kuti. The human rights activist, Beko Ransom Kuti, Professor Olikoye Ransom Kuti, and the activist, Yemisi Ransom Kuti. This is because his mother was one of the most prominent members of the influential Ransom Kuti family. He had his primary education at St. Peter's Primary School, Abeokuta. In 1940, he went to Abeokuta Grammar School, where he started what has become his second nature, winning several prizes in literary composition. He later proceeded to Government College Ibadan in 1946. After completing his course at Government College in 1952, he began studies at the then University College Ibadan between 1952 and 1954 that was affiliated to the University of London. He studied English literature, Greek, and Western history. As a student, Professor Soyinka had already started his writing career. For between 1953 and 1954, his second and last at University College, Ibadan, he began work on Kefi's Birthday Treat, a short radio play for Nigeria Broadcasting Service that was broadcast in July 1954. Later in 1954, Professor Soyinka relocated to England, where he continued his studies in English literature. Under the supervision of his mentor, the literary giant Wilson Knight at the University of Leeds, 1954 to 1957. Even before defending his BA, Professor Soyinka had begun publishing and worked as an editor for the satirical magazine, The Eagle. Chairman, sir, our distinguished guests, after graduating, he remained in Leeds with the intention of earning an MA. Professor Soyinka intended to write new works combining European theoretical traditions with those of his Yoruba cultural heritage. His first major play, The Swamp Dwellers, 1958, was followed a year later by The Lion and the Jewel, a comedy that attracted interest from several members of London's Royal Court Theatre. Encouraged, Professor Soyinka moved to London, where he worked as a play reader for the Royal Court Theatre. During the same period, both his plays were performed way back in Nigeria. Professor Soyinka received a Rockefeller Research Fellowship from University College Ibadan, his alma mater, for research on African theatre, and he returned to Nigeria. He produced his new satire, The Trials of Brother Jerry. His work, A Dance of the Forest, 1960, a biting criticism of Nigeria's political elites, won a contest that year as the official play for Nigeria's Independence Day. On October 1st, that is 1960, it premiered in Lagos as Nigeria celebrated its sovereignty. Also in 1960, Soyinka established the 1960 Masque, an amateur ensemble to which he devoted considerable time for the next few years. A man of multiple literary talents, Professor Soyinka wrote the first full-length play produced on Nigerian television, entitled My Father's Body, and directed by Segun Olushola. The play was featured on the Western Nigerian Television, WNTV, on August 1960. With the Rockefeller grant, this professor, by 1960, already bought a Land Rover and began traveling throughout the country as a researcher with the Department of English Language of the University College in Ibadan. While researching and writing and directing plays, he formerly lectured at University College Ibadan, University of Lagos, and also the Department of English Language at the University of Ile-Ife, now Obafemi Awolowo University in Ife. Great Ife. It is on record that in 1964, he resigned his university post as a protest against imposed pro-government behavior by authorities. This was to mark the beginning of his confrontation with the authorities. An international itinerant lecturer, he has lectured in Nigeria, United Kingdom, and United States of America. Living abroad, especially in years of his political exile, he was a professor first at Cornell University and then at Emory University, Atlanta, both in the United States of America. Where in 1996, he was appointed Robert W. Woodruff Professor of the Arts. He has also taught, interestingly, at universities of Oxford, Harvard, and Yale. Chairman, sir, Professor Soyinka stands out as a colossus in the world of literature. His mastery and the use of the language has reached such a height that even the owners of the English language are now learning it from him. His prodigious capability in all the genres of literature has resulted in a situation where, like the man that has many wives that have borne him many children, he sometimes forgets their names, and we ask them, who is your mother? So also, we can dare say that Professor Soyinka has written so many novels, poems, autobiographical works, plays, and all, that for now, he's not sure of how many works that are there for him. This is the author of such epical works as The Lion and the Joel, Before the Blackout, Kongi's Harvest, The Trials of Brother Jerry, The Strong Breed, The Man Died, The Interpreters, Madman and Specialist, Season of Anomy, Dance of the Forest, Death and the King's Horsemen, The Beatification of Area Boy, King Babel, and more recently, Ake, The Years of Childhood, and You Must Set Forth at Dawn. And as is normally said, there are so many others, too numerous to mention. He is undoubtedly a literary giant. Not only has Soyinka been writing, he has been directing and acting plays. His works are a must-read for any serious student of English literature, almost like the works of the legendary William Shakespeare. Mr. Chairman, sir, Professor Soyinka's reputation globally is not restricted to his intellectual prowess. Instead, he stands out in Nigeria and indeed African history as an unrepentant, dogged, conscientious, audacious, and resilient fighter against first colonialism in Nigeria and since independence against tyrannical regimes in Nigeria, whether military or civilian. For any administration, the fear of Professor Soyinka is the beginning of wisdom. His patriotic struggle to work for the unity of Nigeria in the difficult years of Nigeria's civil war led to his being jailed for 22 months between 1967 and 1969. It is remarkable that during this period of incarceration, he was still able to write. In the difficult years of the royal and titanic struggle against General Abacha, he was a member of NADECO. He, like many others, were haunted And it is recorded that in November 1994, he had to escape through the border with Benin Republic, known as the Nadeko route, using a motorcycle. Mr. Chairman, what is however not quite clear is whether Professor Soyinka rode the Okada himself or whether he was carried by an Okada man. It was from there that he moved to the United States and continued to battle the Abacha regime, which in 1997 charged him with treason, and Abacha proclaimed a death sentence against him in absentia. We thank God he's still alive today. Professor Soyinka has not relented in criticizing, where necessary, civilian regimes, combining his creative writings that have been concerned with, and I quote, the oppressive boots and the irrelevance of the color of the boot that wears it, and direct open criticisms. Nearly all regimes in Nigeria have been subjected to Soyinka's patriotic evaluation. He has remained consistent, principled, and uncompromising in his dealings with governments in Nigeria. It is believed that many governments have failed to appoint him a minister because if they did, he might carry placard against the government even while he's a minister. For him, there is no permanent friend as far as regimes are concerned. What is constant is the interest of Nigerians. It is therefore not surprising that all his life he has stood stoutly and firmly against maladministration and oppression everywhere. His Nobel acceptance speech in 1986, titled, and I quote, "This past must address its present," end of quote, was devoted to South African freedom fighter, the great Nelson Mandela. His speech was an outspoken criticism of apartheid and the politics of racial segregation imposed on the majority by the then nationalist South African government. In 2006, characteristically, he cancelled his keynote speech for the annual SEA Writers Award ceremony in Bangkok to protest the Thai military successful coup against the government. For Professor Soyinka, he remains without any apologies, an apostle of social aluta. The struggle for a better Nigeria continues. Chairman, sir, a scholar of international repute, Professor Soyinka stands out as a literary icon, a member of many elite academic and professional bodies. He has also won many laurels and awards, including the honorary doctorates of the University of Leeds in 1973 and Harvard University 1993, Princeton University 2005, honorary fellow of the Royal Society of Literature 1983, the Ansfield World Book Award USA 1983, and the big one, the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1986, the Ajit Prize for Literature, same 1986, and later the Commander of the Federal Republic, CFR. He got the coveted Benson Medal from Royal Society of Literature in 1990, the Academy of Achievement Golden Plate Award 2009, the Ansfield World Book Award Lifetime Achievement, United States, and in October 1994, he was appointed UNESCO Goodwill Ambassador for the promotion of African culture, human rights, freedom of expression, media and communication. And in 2014, the International Humanist Award. A true cultural ambassador. In 2005, Professor Soyinka was conferred with the chieftaincy title of Akin Latun of Egbaland by the Oba Alake of Egbaland. A true family man, Professor Soyinka is married to the charming, elegant, and gorgeous Folake daughter. He is blessed with many children, because as a chief, we cannot tell you the number of his children. Especially as he has always declined to say the number of his children, with good sense of humor, and I quote, "In our tradition, we don't count our children." In my case, taking it last now, Chairman, in my case, the gods have been kind, maybe overgenerous. He has a very convivial and amiable disposition, which is easily detectable in his thunderous and baritone voice and laughter. He is a rugged fighter, but very courteous in his interpersonal relationships. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sir, it is this man of exceptional and uncommon dedication to scholarship, an outstanding academic and literary icon, that has demonstrated unparalleled steadfastness, conscientiousness, industry, and loyalty to his profession, and indeed to our dear motherland, Nigeria. A true Nigerian ambassador, a stickler and indefatigable defender of maintaining the best standards in the governance of our dear country, a courageous reformer and pathfinder, a man of unquestionable integrity, honesty, a man with an untainted and sterling track record of performance in the discharge of his duties for almost 80 years, an outstanding academic, a poet, a novelist, a playwright, a political activist of unparalleled fearlessness, audacity, and sagacity, the world-recognized and celebrated icon, an inestimable asset to the Nigerian nation and indeed Africa, the one and only Professor Chief Akiwande Oluwole Babatunde Soyinka, aka Wole Soyinka, that I now respectfully invite to deliver his lecture on the succinct but loaded lecture, Culture and Growth. Professor Soyinka.
Citation, Mr. Vice Chancellor, Vice Chancellors here, my dear colleagues, my good friend, High Priest Eberhard, there he is, good to see you. A man who's very much at the heart of this discourse. Because of that, I was looking through the program, and I saw that the High Priest did send a message to this event. I want to cite just a sentence from that message. Of that citation, which you just heard, by the way, as well as the very unique and original form of citation that went before by that duo, we have just one expression in Yoruba, Oro Pesije. Now, the quotation, goodwill message from the High Priest Eberhard. It says, I see this as an opportunity to cure our terminally ailing culture. I'm confident that the Nobel laureates, etc., will inject meaningful debate which will help halt the meanness, menace, and sacrilege by the commercial foreign religions threatening our cultural existence. It's as if we consulted earlier before I began to write my speech. Culture at risk. Culture at risk, yes, but from what directions? Ranged against what forces? Multiple directions, of course, but principal among these is religion. I intend to focus to some extent on that rampaging attestation to irrationality and supremacist instinct known as religion. The news may be unpalatable, but the findings are incontestable. Religion is intrinsically culture-phobic, whatever claims its servitors make to the contrary. Well, as in all paradoxes, however, a pause. Religion has also contributed immensely to world cultures. Its aesthetic enhancement of landscapes is undeniable. And the same goes for music, dance, religious poetry, religion-inspired poetry, human designs, and even philosophy. Culture, however, to return to our main paradoxical concern, culture would appear to be its own worst enemy. Or perhaps I should adjust that remark, making it read that culture often serves the enemies of culture. Certainly there are very few products of human practices and supposed intelligence that evoke such contradictory, sometimes self-canceling assessments, acceptability, as those that are confidently cited under the cultural mandate. The debate is endless. It does not matter whether we're speaking of fattening houses for prospective brides, or technologies for planting, harvesting, and preserving, or people's annual pilgrimage to a spiritual landmark of a community consecrated over centuries. We encounter both positive and negative indications. On the positive side, we can identify nations where, for instance, culture has proved not merely a weapon of resistance, but has played a fundamental role in the self-recovery of a people after subjugation by external forces. Think Korea under Japan, for instance, just to stretch our horizons beyond the immediate African experience of, among others, settler colonialism and its imperial cultures. On the negative side, we are not short of instances where the baggage of cultural retention has not only weakened a people's capacity for resistance under aggression, but more routinely even retarded their material progress. Circumstances abound where cultural fidelity has actually facilitated a people's subjugation, their meek submission to an invading force. Not a few nations have undergone that debilitating experience of conquest through stubborn adherence to outdated cultural usages, ineffectual against external onslaught. No matter the level of subjugation, however, what history instructs is that sooner or later a passionate commitment to the recovery of one's cultural antecedents surges. The battle for suppressed identity, with or without adulteration or impurities, is renewed, and a struggle commences that even aspires to appropriate the full narrative of a people's coming in being, their self-cognition as a distinct entity. Let me illustrate this with the extreme instance that straddles both sides of the Atlantic, the liberation strategy of African Americans in the 60s to 80s in the diaspora, and even later, of course, most especially in the United States. One includes even mundane weaponry like attire, such as the dashiki or cuisine called soul food, the revival of remotely recollected or deliberately researched social models and relationships from the mother continent, all the way to music and dance modes, sculpture, or hairstyle. Who can forget the famous Afro? When did plaited hair on male heads become fashionable? From that cultural revolution in the United States. And then innovations in other creative disciplines, painting, drama, the quest for an alternative worldview that claimed African origin and authenticity, not omitting even the change of names, even symbolically. This cultural upheaval resulted in changes in educational thinking that amounted to revolution in school curricula, demands for the total reorientation of studies in both higher school and tertiary institutions, several of which became enshrined under law. It proved a period of internal convulsion for the entire society, with a yet subsisting impact, not just on descendants, African descendants of the uprooted Africans, but on other racial components of that nation. It embraced a revaluation and a critique of existing literary and artistic canons, sometimes exclusivist and reductionist. One must never deny that. Indeed, one must always be wary of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and be on guard on watering down through ignorance or partial knowledge of the very material of teaching that was offered as substitute in many guilt-ridden, sometimes even browbeaten institutions. That is all part and parcel of the ambiguities and contradictions of innovation. Some contradictions of this nature are ideologically motivated and controlled, contributing to the detriment of objective human knowledge through the avoidance of dispassionate selectiveness. China offers us yet another globally acknowledged instance in the Cultural Revolution of Mao Zedong. That revolution eventually reversed itself nearly 180 degrees, but not before the massive waste of brain power and a setback in social development. Today, that cultural revolution is viewed with bewilderment at the uncritical extremes of its dictates. Its iconic retention is the justly reviled Gang of Four. Today, virtually every ill in China is sometimes blamed on the legacy of that Gang of Four. Did that distant aberration affect us here on our black continent? Yes, indeed. Let me illustrate this with a personal experience, just to remind us that we're not talking theory here, but we're talking social history. We're not speaking of localized, isolated phenomena, but of collateral effects, often far from the locality of origin, ideology, and indeed cultures. That revolution, needless to say, offers us one of those cautionary instances, history lessons against the wholesale adoption of external models, however radical in orientation or seemingly progressive. Consequences of that kind of conduct still pervade contemporary existence in many parts of the world. We're talking about stemming from the so-called Cultural Revolution in China. It warns us against complacency, whatever culture and its centrality to the humanities in general finds itself besieged, yet cited as authority for change or progress. Talking of history lessons, a quick but related digression. Can anyone here educate me regarding why history has been removed from the nation's school curricula? Is it really possible to think of a cultured mind that is devoid of even a smattering knowledge of history? To what purpose was history excised? And in consideration of what future for the intellectual formation of coming generations? It's amazing how much ground can be eroded right beneath one's feet in this nation between sleeping and waking, until we fall into the pit of ignorance of how our humanity came to be, which is what history is about. And we're speaking here of history. Please remember that, not specialized subjects like lunar hydroponics. However, another place and time for that unconscionable deprivation in youth. beliefs or practices. However, culture itself is an amalgam of social practices, including its ethical abstractions. Ethics also advance with humanity's improved knowledge of the world and of humanity itself, the nature of humanity itself. When therefore we say, for instance, preserve that shrine, we do not thereby preach, preserve, and entrench its antiquated or anti-human practices where they are. When we say this ancient mosque must be defended even in the midst of hostilities, we do not thereby identify with its position on the place of women in society or claims to suzerainty over every aspect of human conduct. When we decry the torching of a historic church, we do not thereby justify Christianity's ancient crimes against humanity, including its sanctification of human enslavement. What we insist upon is that human history is both, accomplishment and failure. That history, therefore, is incomplete without their preservation. How depressing, therefore, to find myself standing in this very part of the nation yet again, where 10 years ago, also on a lecture podium, I railed against the proclivities of certain religious movements as reported in a media publication under the headlines, Muwanse community destroys 100 shrines to cleanse land, a real name withheld, to take refuge in that media innovation that finds professional virtue in the conferment of anonymity. I adopt that escapist formula also simply to deflect personalized responses which were so prevalent in reactions to that prior lecture. This time I intend to avoid the possibilities of ethnic warfare and consequent loss of attention to the issue at the heart of discourse, which is iconoclasm, especially when born of prejudice, indoctrination, brainwashing, and thus resides in the arena of superstitions, sometimes called religion. Without protective armor, therefore, we continue our discourse in the spirit of real name withheld. So, once again, the headline, Muwanse community destroys 100 shrines to cleanse land. And the reportage goes thus. Muwanse, a community in Kuruba State, again, real name withheld, this weekend ended a 3-day restoration crusade organized by the United Congress of Muwanse Christians, UCMC, with the destruction of no fewer than 100 shrines all over the area. The crusade, which attracted an unprecedented crowd estimated at more than 1.5 million people each night, was characterized by innumerable signs and wonders as different people were healed of diverse sicknesses ranging from ear problems, chest pains, while many vomited poisons. Their leader is reported to have said that the movement was still intended to achieve, again I quote, the total emancipation of Muwanse nation, spiritually, economically, and politically. Muwanse is to Kuruba land what Kuruba land is to Nigeria, and since Kuruba land was waiting for the restoration of Muwanse, the entire country is indirectly waiting for the empowerment and restoration of Kuruba land. Finally, after paragraphs of such liberation rhetoric, we're sure that the movement intends to plunge even deeper. Very soon, it boasted the over 1,000 shrines in Muwanse would be destroyed completely. That was over 10 years ago. Has anything changed since then? Has the nation learned a lesson about intolerance? Has there been counter-enlightenment? Evidently not. And so you see how wise I am to situate that episode in the real names withheld tradition. Because here is a little exercise I have for everyone. Go through the media publications, just nearly 1 exact month to this present. Leaf through the pages and see if you can escape the feeling of déjà vu, translated roughly as not again. Here is a citation from just a month away. Quote, poised to rid the kingdom of all fetish and criminal acts, as well as open a new phase in its history, His Royal Highness the Soshiga, real title withheld, of Soshiland, real name withheld, has banned idol worshipping and blood sacrifices in his domain. The monarch and the Soshiga, etc., of Soshiland Christian Association has last week organized a prayer session in the kingdom where they burnt idols and other evil activities. The same rhetoric, the same sanctimonious tone, the same rationalization, the same born self-arrogation, the same triumphalism, the same dosage of religious afflators, the same lack of historic situating that moves to remind these evangelists of their lack of knowledge of others, and thus